very hard with our team to make drastic changes to ensure that you have a rich experience here today. This wouldn't have been possible without our inspiring speakers who adjusted their schedules and made it here to be here for all of you today. We want to take a moment to thank both our team and the Harvard administration and staff for accommodating these changes and helping us face Storm Neptune in the face. You will have the problem of plenty today because we have 2 days of programming accommodated in one. We have a lot of keynotes, panels, workshops, idea labs, and they all revolve around our theme: intent, action, impact. We would also like to acknowledge our platinum sponsors, the Kennedy School Center for Public Leadership and Fidelity Investments, and all our academic and corporate sponsors for supporting us as we pull through this conference. We'll start the day with 2 back-to-back keynotes, which is very exciting. We first have Alan Khazei and Vanessa Kirsch, and then we have David Bronstein.
Hi everyone, we made it. We're so happy that you're here. Thank you for coming, and thank you for all the messages that we received when we were in our war room yesterday trying to make it work. So we are delighted to start today with our 2 amazing keynotes, Alan Khazei and Vanessa Kirsch. Alan Khazei is the founder and CEO of Be the Change, which creates bipartisan national issue-based campaigns with the aim to affect public policy and culture. Vanessa Kirsch is the founder and CEO of New Profit, a non-profit venture philanthropy fund. In 2014, Alan and Vanessa were named by Fortune magazine and CNN Money to list into their list of world's greatest leaders 9 dynamic duos alongside some of the most powerful figures in politics, media, business, and philanthropy. And we are honored to have this duo, this married couple on Valentine's Day, talk to us about their own venture and their own journey towards social change.
Hi everyone. And then also moderating this discussion we have our very own Dutch Leonard, who is a George F. Baker Professor of Public Management at the Kennedy School, and is also an Elliot I. Snyder and Family Professor of Business Administration here at the Business School. And then even more importantly, he's the co-chair of the Social Enterprise Initiative at HBS, which is a big reason that this whole thing is coming off today. We're really thankful for them. So we would welcome them to the stage to begin the day. And thanks for being here.
Good morning, everyone. And just before we get started with the panel, which we're all looking forward to, I wanted to take just 1 minute on behalf of Social Enterprise to thank our organizers who do this incredible work. This is I think, the best social enterprise conference on the planet. It's all student-driven. And in the last 24 hours, it has been re-driven. And so one of my other duties within the Harvard community is that I'm the program chair, co-chair for the program on crisis leadership at the Kennedy School. So I know good crisis leadership when I see it. And what good crisis leadership consists of is rapid rethinking, reprogramming, improvisation, creativity, decentralization. All of those are the hallmarks of what you guys did over the last couple of days. This is the second time in 3 years that the student organizers have been forced to reprogram quickly in the face of a blizzard. And we have a tradition in the crisis management profession, which is that when you do really great work, you become a professional crisis manager, and you're recognized for this by having a coin. So this is the coin of the program on crisis leadership. And I've got one for each of our 3 organizers to thank them for their brilliant work in the face of a blizzard. And we are not going to be stopped. And this is why. So now I'm totally thrilled to have a chance to talk to my 2 friends, Alan and Vanessa, about everybody's favorite subtopic, which is social enterprise. We call it social enterprise because we have a hypothesis, which is that it's not about the tax status. That's the kind of nonprofit definition. It's not about the tax status. It's about being socially mission-driven. So I refer to the kinds of organizations that you all have built as socially mission-driven organizations. And the question for this conference and for us, for you this morning on Valentine's Day, is how did you come into this? What brought you into this domain of social action? So tell us each a little bit of your story of how you came into it, and then I'll have some other questions. So, Vanessa?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's great to be here, and I agree with how adaptive everybody's been to make this happen. And I happened to be at the one 3 years ago because there was a snowstorm. They called me in to do a keynote also, so I seem to be, we seem to be on the snowstorm circuit here. It really is, this is one of our favorite gatherings, and so many people here are people we're either connected to or we will be connected to, and it's inspiring. When we started this work and when we got into it, you would never see a room full of this many people at Harvard Business School thinking about social enterprise. So it has come, the field has come so far in the past few years. For me, I actually grew up here in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and I would say that the first time somebody called me a social entrepreneur, I said, I am not, that's not true. And then I was like, what are they talking about? So it really was a concept that I was completely not familiar with, but when I thought about the word social entrepreneur, it actually was a fit. And it was, I was an Echoing Green fellow. Some of you probably heard of Echoing Green. I actually will get into it more, but I met my husband at an Echoing Green conference, so there you go. And I had started an urban peace corps called Public Allies, and I'd done it right out of school. I went to Tufts University, and right out of school I started Public Allies in Washington, D.C. We had 18 young people in a very small program, and I met Ed Cohen, who started Echoing Green, and he said, you should take this to scale. And I said, what is scale? And so it really was that experience at a young age of what is possible and learning from the private sector how the private sector takes things to scale. And we were in the early innings of using and applying those principles to nonprofit work. And so I heard about this thing called City Year up in Boston, and we learned early innings on what really it meant to be scaling things. And for me, being an entrepreneur and scaling in the social sector, really, it started to dawn on me that we needed new capital systems that supported social entrepreneurs differently than foundations and philanthropists currently work. And so in the back of my mind, after Alan and I took a year and traveled around the world, I was determined to come back to Boston and start a venture philanthropy fund. So that's like the arc of my story. Started moving properly about 15 years ago. And it's been a great 15 years.
So I want to come back to the genesis of that idea in a moment, but first, Alan, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came into this?
Sure. Well, it's great to be here. I want to congratulate Aisha and Molly and Priscilla for, you've already passed the first entrepreneur's test, right? And just being able to be flexible and turn the dime, all of you for coming this morning. It's fun for Vanessa and I to do this together on Valentine's Day. So for me, my story really, it starts with my parents. My father was an immigrant from Iran. He was a doctor. And he left the country of dictatorship for a country of freedom. And my dad raised me that this is the greatest country in the world because it's the only place he can come as a foreigner and become a citizen and contribute. I really believe in that and builds the values of America and what we stand for. But he also raised me, he comes from a country with thousands of years of history. He was a good student of history. He also raised me to believe that when we don't live up to our ideals, that's when we get in trouble. He taught me about our state and the British government were most of that when I was a little boy, before it was all public, and talking about our support for other dictators like Batista in Cuba and Marcos in the Philippines, not supporting Mandela. So he raised me to really love this country and love to fight for its ideals. My mother was a nurse. She was Italian. She was a classic Italian. She fell in love with you over the phone. And if my mother was here, she'd hug and kiss every single one of you and ask you about what you're doing and tell you how beautiful you are. While my dad was all about history and the big ideas, my mom was about people. And she taught me that every single person has gifts and bring them out. And really try to love everybody, but my mother did. And so when I came up, my parents were both in the medical profession because they wanted to literally save lives. And so they also taught me about service. So when I heard about the idea of national service, that there should be an opportunity for all young people as part of growing up, to have a rite of passage where they could spend a year full-time working with other people from different backgrounds, it just kind of hit me. And I was lucky to be assigned to be roommates with Michael Brown at Harvard College. Literally the first day we met somebody who put us together. And so we started Senior as a model for this idea of national service. But that's really how I got into it. First inspired by my parents, and then connected with Michael around this idea. And it was the kind of thing where we really had to do it. We got so captivated by the idea that it just felt like we talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who tell you this is true for Vanessa. It's a passion inside of you that we just have to pursue it.
So for you, the passion came early. It came from your family. So Vanessa, where was your passion for social enterprise? What was the genesis of that?
I think it probably stems most from my learning style, which is I'm dyslexic, and so I started as, in first, second, third grade, having to figure out how to get through school in some different way. And so I thought outside of the box, and I was creative and inventive, and probably started my first nonprofit in high school, and it was just became the path to, always think about the third way, and to really do things differently. And I also, the passion for change also came from seeing my peers who were struggling in school heading on a track that was to not go to college and to not have a profession. And I kept saying, why not? Why not? Why can't we be all that we can be? And that really led me to start Public Allies because I wanted to go find the diamonds in the rough, the kids that weren't being given and held up as the stars, and give them the opportunity, because I believe that people who have had adversity are more apt to have that tenacious, determined personality to really drive something to a greater impact, and that we're going to be a country that raises everybody's potential.
So would it be fair to say that some of this came for you, your social mission, from the fact that you felt different, you were experiencing the system that you found others?
Very much so.
Yeah, so it's so interesting, even in the first sentences of your discussion, both of you were talking about flexibility, adaptability, passion, engagement, where the missions come from. I think that's just such an important part of all of what social enterprise is about. So let me pursue that a little bit. It's Valentine's Day, so we should be talking about passion and how these things come together. But say a little bit more about where the specific intent came for your particular choices. You started Public Allies, and eventually you decided. So say a little bit more about your intent about New Profit, where that came from.
It came from a deep-seated frustration and anger, I'd say, in that when Alan and I took a year and we traveled around the world and spent an amazing year and met with 40 of the great Ashoka Fellows and great social leaders all over the world, and their ideas were so great and they were saving lives and changing the world, and yet in every place nobody else had heard of them. And the social innovations hadn't really spread. And meanwhile, in villages in Vietnam or wherever we were, we'd come across Coca-Cola and the big brands. And it was something about why is it that we put so much time and energy into scaling a company like Coca-Cola to the villages of Vietnam, and we don't put the same energy into a nutrition program that's saving lives or whatever it might be. And this was to sort of that driving passion. It's one thing to think that, and then you hear it, and you hear it. But we met with 350 people for a year. That's all we did. And I came back obsessed. I mean, moved to tears over how dysfunctional the sector was, and how many opportunities were being left behind because we weren't giving the great leaders that were the grassroots leaders, that were the people who didn't have a business degree, the same kind of resources that we were giving people in the for-profit sector, and I wanted to change that. And I became obsessed. Luckily, I'm married to somebody somebody who's obsessed. Really, I mean, we should talk about marriages because it's Valentine's Day, but we need to be obsessed. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't, the voices of all the people I saw, the kids who didn't have the health services or whatever it might be, just lived in my head to the point where if I didn't do it, I would have felt it was morally, not right.
So how about in your case, you formed the intent to be engaged in social mission. Did you find right away which one you wanted to pursue, or did that take you a while? How did City Year commitment to that?
It was a journey. As I said, I fell in love with the idea of national service, and this was back in the 1980s. And originally, Michael and I thought, well, it should be like the Peace Corps. We should have a president who will create a federal program and make it happen. And we both spent some time working in Washington. I worked on Jerry Carr's 1984 presidential campaign because he was the first candidate to say he create national service. He didn't win while Reagan was reelected. As we started talking to more and more people, we heard two things. One, nothing was going to come from the federal government during that time. And also, there was a lot of questions. People like the idea, how do you know this can work? You're really going to bring together black and white, rich and poor, city and suburban, and former gang members alongside faculty graduates in their 18, 19, 20. This was the height of sort of, my generation was going to be the generation, the W generation. They really don't want to do this for a year. How are you going to pay for it? What about organized labor? Will they just see this as something that will make job? All these questions. And also, what can they do for value? So we said, we actually have to go build a model. We actually called it an action tank because we wanted to affect public policy. And so it was really from that feedback and this idea of work. And also looking at what's happening at the time, there were other programs happening both. Jerry Brown started the California Conservation Corps. It was a city volunteer program in New York where Michael worked at. And so we said, why don't the contribution we can try to make is just do a program locally here in Boston and try to show that the idea could work and then leverage that for larger public policy change. So it was sort of just listening to the feedback and realizing, okay, we got to show you that this idea can happen.
So it's such an interesting concept. You're calling it an action tank. That suggests that from the very beginning, you thought of building City Year not just as an organization, but as a form of advocacy.
Yes.
As a demonstration.
Yes.
We're trying to show that this would be done.
Yes.
And so you had much wider ambitions. And the idea of scaling this wasn't that you would necessarily, the City Year would take over, but rather that others would follow along. So that was all from the very beginning that was part of your intention?
Yes. Yeah. Our idea was if we could, sort of Field of Dreams was a popular movie design. If we build it, it will come. And also what I've learned is people have to experience change. We want to make changes, so we said we have to build this. But from the beginning, my thought was, if we could build it, we could then point to it as an example that could be used for larger policy. So we designed City Year thinking, well, what could a national policy around national service be? So we were very intentional about it's got to be for everybody. So we made sure that the core members came from all different backgrounds. We thought national service would be for everybody. We thought that it should be a public-private partnership. It shouldn't just be government run or government funded. So we actually started with all private funding because we learned from some other programs. If you start with all government funding, it's then very hard to get the private sector involved. So let's go. We said that there had to be a reward in the service. So we started with a stipend and then a college scholarship for our core members because we thought that service should be a vehicle to advance the American dream. So we designed it with a number of things that we could point to and say, this is how a national policy can be developed. And when I meet with social entrepreneurs now, I always ask them, what's your action tank strategy? Because the real impact of City Year wasn't just creating City Year, was that we helped to inspire morale. And there's been, I'm very grateful that we've had 25,000 young people spend a year at City Year. I'm more grateful that over 900,000 have done Maryland. That's a larger impact. And any social entrepreneur, any social innovation, any social enterprise, if you think consciously about it, you can have a public policy strategy and build it into what you're doing. And that's where a big part of your leverage. David Morrison's going to be talking next. These are powerful.
So one of the things that's really interesting in your answer is that I asked you about intention, and you talk about two different things. You talk about the intention of purpose. What was it you were trying to affect? But you were also very intentional about how you constructed the strategy and the organization as far as advocacy. So there's a lot of intent in the way Was that true for you too, Vanessa? Did you know immediately, I mean, you knew the general purpose of what new profit was going to be about. Did you immediately understand the way that was going to be able to be successful and what the strategy was going to be?
To echo what Alan's saying, and now when new profit makes investments, we look for sort of this dual action theory of change where you have to master the problem. You have to be an expert and understand the problem and what your entrepreneurial insight is going to do and how it's going to be leveraged in the whole entire system. That's how we look at and we do due diligence on organizations. For new profit, yes, I will say that in 15 years it's evolved and that we can't, it's good to have a theory, but increasingly, our deals are nonprofits that we invest in. When Wendy Kopp started her Teacher Corps, Teach for America, she had one theory of change. We worked with her over many years, and that theory of change has evolved, that it's really about, say, Teach for America, what's really to train teachers. It became about training a generation around what education is, what's possible in education, which was a much greater vision. So I think it does evolve. It's not static at all. But the interrelationship between, I think the question we see a lot of our social entrepreneurs struggling with is, how big do I need to grow to be a proof point? And at what point do I really turn my energy more to the system I'm trying to change and leverage that? And I think, as we see the movement changing of social entrepreneurs, the trajectory is not only to do that through public policy, but through market change. And there's so many interesting ways with harnessing technology, corporate and private partnerships, things like that, that enable social entrepreneurs to make an impact, prove a point, and then use that to leverage changing the whole system.
So I think there's something really very important about the way you put this, which is that the purpose intent has not changed. Okay, you were pretty clear about that from the beginning. It was driven by your passion. It's what brought you into the space. But what has changed over time is the evolution of the strategy and the actions that you're taking, both because you're learning as you go, and also because the world keeps changing. So you have this new technology of social media and all these other. So the essence of this is the sort of adaptive, agile, sort of flexible process.
For New Profit, when we started New Profit, we thought if we created a venture capital fund for the nonprofit sector, Field of Dreams, we would build it, they would come. And we thought donors would be just calling or actually do due diligence and ensure outcomes and use your money towards the things that really work and pull out things that don't. Well, that theory of change didn't quite play out at that point. We needed it to in the early days, and so we shifted our attention to let's make some proof points, and then we created a division of New Profit called America Forward, who's just run by one of the people here inside, it's Kira. And we were able to say, okay, we're going to create a demonstration, and then the government is going to behave in ways that we'd like to see them behave. And we created the Social Innovation Fund in the federal government administration. And we saw that leverage. And what's interesting is now we've come back to the original, because now we have a track record and things are starting to, finally after 15 years, donors are knocking down our door and saying that they want to come. And so I would say we just temporarily abandoned our original strategy, and now we're coming back to it. And so, I think time is a factor in this whole thing. I know that Bill Drayton, who's a very big mentor to both of us, says, you might not really know your entrepreneurial insight until 7 years into the whole process. So you just keep going with deep belief that you have it, but you're adaptive and listening constantly and working with what the context is that you're in. But if you do it long enough, like we have, you do come back to, AmeriCorps serving 900,000 people, or New Profit actually having raised $250 million,
So in an important sense, though, the strategy is to be adaptive and reliably learning and developing, rather than to have a fixed idea of what you're trying to do. So we've talked a little bit about intention, we've talked a little bit about action. You just used one of the magic words, which is about outcome. Tell me a little bit about how you thought about impacts. Alan, in the city year work, was measurement a really important part of that from the early days, or was that something you brought along later?
It's evolved. I think we were looking at a sort of dual impact strategy. One was, we talked about the public policy. Could we leverage city year at that time, our headquarters was right near the airport. So we invited all the candidates to come on this picture. They were pretty close. And Bill Clinton came and got inspired and used to be as a model for the Battle Club. So that was one. The other was the impact of our service. And when we started, again, because we were trying to get this action tank, we did a little bit of everything. We wanted to show the National Service could work with senior citizens, could work on issue of homelessness, on urban gardening, on education, on schools, etc. And we did a variety of projects. Then over time, we saw, especially as the network got developed, and there were other service programs. And we, as we looked at what our owners were doing, found that our biggest impact was in schools with children because they are near peers. They were old enough that the young people in the schools would look up to them as mentors or role models. They were young enough they could relate. And so we focused the work on working in schools and attacking the high school dropout crisis, and now we're very intensely focused on impact in schools and on moving grade levels, and we're getting kids to stay in school, we're getting them to graduate. So it's really, and that's very important in terms of being able to show to the world, here's the value of the organization.
So that's so interesting because you had this dual mission of advocacy and spreading the idea through having others pick it up. And so you were studying the impact in that sense, the impact, but also had to demonstrate the impact of the individual projects as part of that. So it sounds like you were working both of those. Vanessa, you would have had a somewhat different problem because the new profit is investing in different enterprises. How did you think about impact, yours and theirs?
Well, I would say this is one of the areas where the field has just become, moved light years. From the days we started, there was nobody in our portfolio doing randomized controlled trials or anything like that in early days, and now every one of our organizations is on a course to do randomized controlled trials of some sort. So that is the sea change, and it really, I think, is driven by the market, which is philanthropists. I mean, just a little context, there are 150 nonprofits that start a day in America, and philanthropists are just inundated with choice. And so they are more and more driven to have a sense of why am I putting my money here versus here. And so there's a greater pressure in our sector for more and more evidence, which I think is wonderful but worrisome at the same time, because we just talked about adaptiveness. And when you do a randomized control trial, you're locked into a behavior for a set of years to see how it's affecting one group of organizations versus those that aren't getting their impact. And you can't change the model at all during that time. And so it has created an interesting dynamic for social entrepreneurs to assess when to do randomized control trials, what part of the organization, and be very clear, because so many of the randomized control trials that are extremely expensive, and thanks to people at Harvard Business School and Penny School, the costs are coming way down, so that it is really more now about, like, in 2-3 years, the market will be, we're spending way over $14 million on a set of randomized control trials right now in our portfolio, and I think that that cost will come down to under $1 million collectively, so the costs are going way down, which means you can constantly get data with large data sources of counterfactual data. That's why we're doing the social impact bonds now, because that really has, the game has totally changed, but so many of the old school randomized control trials are coming out to have, that some of these organizations aren't having the effects they want to be having. And so I think we have to kind of balance the entrepreneurial opportunity and take into consideration the system-changing effects, such as public policy and other things, and balance that with the beneficiary effects. And that is an equation that I hope everybody in here helps us figure out. The sector is not yet, in my view, become as sophisticated on this topic as it should.
So this is a great topic for possibly for a future SECON conference, which is the challenge of going from organizational scale to system scale and to trying to fix systems. And I'm sure that will be in the conversation over the course of today. But we've talked a little bit about intent and action and impact. So let's talk about what people really want to talk about. It's Valentine's Day, so we want to talk about love, and in particular yours, okay? So you met at an Echoing Green conference, so tell us about how that developed. Was it love at first sight for both of you, or just one of you?
to speak at Harvard. He was in the Senate, and he was a huge supporter of city years. And so I went to pick him up to walk him over to Kennedy School. And I wanted to talk to Harris about presidential campaign, it was 92, year 92, about prospects for healthcare, for national service legislation, all, what he was doing in the Senate. And so I started asking him, he says, right out of his mouth, he said, have you met this woman, Vanessa Kirsch? I said, no. He said, well, I just did an event with her and Public Allies and Hillary Clinton, and it is incredible. That's the new hot national service model, and if you don't watch out, she's going to blow right by you and sit here. And so I thought, I better get to know this person. And then I found out that at the Economic Conference, she was going to be there. And it was here in Concord, Illinois. So because I was in Boston, I didn't have to fly in, so I was actually running a little late. So I'll never forget this. I drove up, I walked in the plane in, and everybody had already been seated for me. And I saw this incredibly beautiful, vivacious, energetic woman who was talking and her hands were moving and all this stuff. And there was a seat across from her. And this was, before Facebook, before YouTube, before anything. So I couldn't Google it before Google, so I couldn't Google it, get a picture of her or anything like that. But I saw myself, and I looked around the room, and I knew a lot of people there already. I wonder if that's Vanessa Kirsch. So I grabbed that seat. And we just started talking, and totally connected. Stayed up till 3 in the morning. We first closed out at dinner, and then we closed out the bar, and then finally we went to the hotel. So you guys have to sort of get out of this space with sort of come here. And I quickly realized that the better strategy for me would be to marry the competition, right?
Our business going on in the idea of mergers and acquisitions. Especially when it brings social issues together. Vanessa, do you remember this meeting as well? Or was that only Alan's first meeting with you?
No, it was the same for me. I had flown up to Boston earlier, a couple months prior, because Harris had also told me I need to meet City. Really, Harris was like the mastermind behind this whole thing. And so I'd flown up, but I'd met with Michael, not Alan, and I learned all about City Year, but I hadn't had a chance to meet Alan. And then when Alan came in to that room, I had the same experience, and I actually wrote in my journal, I found the man I'm going to marry that night. So I have written proof that we didn't keep a journal. But so it was one of those truly love at first sight things, and we had a lot of fun. In the early days of the national service movement, I was living in Washington, he was in Boston, but we were working with Eli Siegel and Bill Clinton to create AmeriCorps. So the first person who really knew we were dating is back in the day, had a travel agent, and we had a travel agent, Kenny, and he noticed that we were combining our flights in Milwaukee to get to California so we could get on the same plane. And so he said, I think something's going on here, and he outed us because we were trying to stay very quiet about this brewing romance.
Those for sure.
The thing I would say is that before we got married, we took a year and we traveled around the world, and that really solidified an amazing, not only marriage, but partnership in changing the world. I think when you do this kind of work, it's incredibly hard, and really it's hard when we're both entrepreneurs, and I think we just try to draft off each other. When Alan was running for U.S. Senate, I was just trying to hunker down and keep new profit stable. And then when Alan wasn't running for U.S. Senate, it was a time for me to sort of make new profit pop. And so we kind of try to not be the wild, crazy entrepreneurial type of people we are simultaneously, although that does happen, today when our kids are at home on Valentine's Day alone, because here we are. And nobody wanted to babysit at 9 o'clock in the morning on a cold day. We have a 12-year-old taking care of a 6-year-old, so fingers crossed. They were supposed to come with us today, but then they were ixnay on going outside. So we're experimenting with something here, very entrepreneurial.
Well, this is part of what we want to get into. So talk a little bit about, you said a little bit about this, Greg, so maybe you can comment on this too. How the partnership supports the work, and vice versa. How does the work affect the partnership that you have?
Well, I think we are both a little crazy. To do this kind of work, as Vanessa said, you have to be passion-driven. and relentless. And so I think it actually helps a lot because we totally understand each other, and we get to, support each other and work together. And it also helps us because we get to do things together like this, or certain gatherings, or that kind of thing. The first conference we were at together, but we've been to others, and that helps. And it also helps that we understand each other, and also help each other out in the kind of work we're doing. So that makes a huge difference. Because if you're in this kind of work, you need a life partner who, at a minimum, understands what you're trying to do, and can be supportive of it. And we totally do, because we're in the same kind of work. I remember Vanessa, Vanessa's really a genius at doing listening towards and reaching out to people as she's formulating her ideas. She worked for Peter Hart, so when she was doing at the beginning, Peter Hart came in some focus groups for her. And one of the questions he asked was, write down one circle that is sort of your professional life. And write down another circle that's your personal interest. And write down another circle that's your family. And see where they intersect. And some people, and the focus groups were various people, and some people had 3 circles that didn't intersect at all. Some people had some overlapping, and when we did that, we actually had our circles totally on top of each other, and actually were excited about that because it all interrelates, and so I think it's we're lucky. We're lucky that we met each other and that we can help each other. And as Vanessa said, there's a union in the gang, and sometimes her work is a little more intense. So I'm supporting her and vice versa. I can tell you that the thing that's made it, I think, doable for us is our children. Well, home this morning. Once you have children, it's the best thing in our lives, our daughter and son. And it's a cliche, but once you have children, everything shifts for you. And you think very differently about, we are thinking about what kind of world that they're going to grow up in and inherit. The unconditional love is unbelievable. It changes, and so we have much more balance. We don't travel as much as we used to. We rarely travel. We bring them. We rarely are traveling at the same time, unless we're doing something together and don't often bring them. We rarely do things like this on Saturday morning, but we're so inspired by the social enterprise effort that, if you have kids, it does, because we were a little out of balance. It's part of the reason why we took the air to travel the world. It forces life balance, and it's an incredible lesson.
We appreciate the commitment on your being here Saturday morning. Vanessa, you want to come in this? Well, just a minute, we're going to turn to questions from the audience. So I have one more question for you first.
It is the journey of an entrepreneur is like, free fall so often. You're in this sort of risk-taking, panic mode, and it's sometimes hard to find mentors that can give you the feedback you need at the right time. And so I just add to it that the other day I was deciding I was doing my self-review for my performance review to the board, and I just had, Alan look at it before I sent it off. And it just, to have a life partner or a partner or even a person in your life who can just be your absolute honest feedback all the time is so invaluable in this work, and it fuels you to take more risk, and because ultimately you're getting that kind of unconditional love, but also the tough love that sometimes you need to hear from somebody.
So just one final quick reflection, and then let's get a couple of questions from the audience. You've talked about the passion that brought you, the passion for your mission, and you also need time for yourself, and you need time for your relationship and your family. So how have you found yourself balancing the work and your life when these are all important elements of your life?
I wouldn't say we've got that one down. The family comes first. When we, this morning, to give you an idea, we got up, everybody exchanged Valentines, we had a nice family breakfast together, and then Dad and I ran off to a speech. But we try to keep those family things like that being the centerpiece that keeps us balanced. It does take work. I would say in my later life now, I really have to go about each week saying, where is the moment of my time or my time to really reflect, because every minute can be consumed, every weekend communities consume. And so you have to be very proactive about even scheduling. I run sort of pie charts of my time every week and then analyze them and redirect and restructure. And I have an assistant who's been with me for 15 years who knows, she's like, you're wobbling, the wheels are about to come off. I'm going to tell you, you need downtime today. I'm canceling your whole schedule. So you really need to get to that point where you're that self-aware or else you really can burn out. And I've done that.
Yeah, I think as I said, it's an evolution. You know, the kids help because there's certain things that you don't do because there's school play or parent-teacher meeting or other stuff. And that's where we actually get our biggest renewal. And you learn, Eli Siegel was one of my top mentors, and he taught me, when he was chairing City Year, he really pushed me to empower everybody around me. And I know that every week he was so devoted. And Eli always was happiest when I could tell him about something great that happened at City Year that I had little or nothing to do with. And he really pushed me to learn to be that kind of leader, to empower others. And so, I wanted to do well, and so I kept trying to push that through the organization. And if I could tell them, well, City did this week or that, and so what was your role? And often my goal is just finding the right person to lead the effort. It's okay, you're doing the job. And so you also, over time, learn that if you have good people with you, really have a strong team, you get to the point, Eli basically told me, you should do only the stuff that only you can do. And that helps with the scheduling stuff and with the balance, because if you're disciplined about that, then you can narrow the choices about where you spend your time. And it's also a higher leverage. And you have a better organization because people truly don't have power.
Those are great answers. A quick question for the audience. Who would like to ask one? Yes, please, right here. Stand up and say it really loud and proud so everybody can hear.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Mo Jia. I'm a first year in Wellesley College, and I'm running a project offering social and psychological support to youth of single-child families.
Okay, question has a question mark at the end.
Okay. So my question is, could you please offer some advice to college students who are just starting their project?
Yes. Great to have your question, and great to show up at 9 a.m. and do what you just did. That's a good start to the leadership moves. I guess I'll do three. I have a lot, but I'll just say three. One is the listening campaigns that I did both for Public Allies and New Profit. I literally, in the case of Public Allies, traveled across country, interviewed people. The listening is so important because when everybody comes at you and says, this is why this is a bad idea, or let me break down your budget, or this doesn't really work, you have the force of real data and real voices to counteract a lot of cynicism about whatever you're doing. So make sure, like we travel around the world for New Profit. People say it's a bad idea, it's not going to work. I'm like, look, I've been to India, I've been to South Africa, and everybody thinks there's a need for a New Profit sector. I'm going to play right through what you're saying. Maybe listen some more, but also stick with what I know. So I think that's critical. I think powerful vulnerability is incredibly important, which means be who you are and show not only your strengths but your weaknesses. Because when you show your weaknesses, people feel enlisted to help you. And so I had an idea team for both New Profit and Public Allies. Public Allies met every Tuesday night. New Profit met every Monday night. There's a team of people, about 40. In the case of New Profit, we held it here at Harvard Business School. Now, to this day, the 40 people who every Monday night as volunteers met to design New Profit, about 6 of them are on staff at New Profit still after 15 years. Some of them are now investors in New Profit. It was a group that felt vested in the creation of New Profit. So that's, and make sure you show that you're in like 120%. Like you are, like questions people ask is, what if you didn't get the money to do this nonprofit? What would you do? If you answer, I would do something else, they're not going to give you money. You answer, I'm doing this one way or the other. And I'll just a quick story. I took, my first grant came with Public Allies because I knew a program officer that I had studied that was likely to give me I didn't, I couldn't figure out how to get a meeting with her. I drove to Chicago because I heard she was going to be at a conference. I waited outside of the conference in my car. When she walked through the door, I jumped out of my car and said, "Can I drive you to the airport?" And he was like, "Who are you?" And I said, "All the way from Washington, D.C. to drive you to the airport. Please let me." She let me, and she gave me my first grant. Winifred Brown and MacArthur Foundation. So that was, you just got to be like all in.
I would say a few things. First of all, find a partner and build a team. So I was lucky, Michael and I were assigned to be roommates, and we just connected around this idea. And then the first thing we did was recruit other people. Jennifer Riley actually was a Wellesley College graduate, and I got to know her. She had volunteered on our campaign, and she was the first person recruited to join us as a co-founder of City, and then Phil Silverstead, and then the team kept growing. The great thing about college is you've got great friends right there. So find people who share your idea. Don't do it by yourself. Second, learn from others. Entrepreneurs don't create from whole cloth. It's kind of a myth. It's, what entrepreneurs do is figure out, say, we arrange existing resources to a higher purpose. So when we were starting City, we read an article that the Honda car company bought one model of every car made in the world each year, and then took them apart and studied them and tried to say, well, what's the best way to do everything? So we, as I said, there were lots of service programs going when we started City. There was Peace Corps, there was Vista, there was California Conservation Corps. We studied a whole bunch of the military, and we tried to take different pieces. So find out whoever else is working. The other is, and learn from them, other efforts. We didn't create City from scratch. We learned from others and try to take pieces. Third is become an expert in your field. As I mentioned, I think it's important. You can affect public policy, but you need to, whatever your issue is, like for us, we became experts in the idea of national service, but also American democracy and constitutional theory. You need to look, if you're an expert, it will give you credibility. Because people will ask you, and I've studied this. And then the last thing I would say is, in terms of, actually two quick things. Sun Tzu said, every battle is won or lost before it's fought. And I want that to be the key sort of mantra of execution. You have to sort of envision where you want to be, and then work backwards. And then finally, and this is Dutch was talking about adaptability, you have to have an integrity to your idea, your organization, your project. So you got to figure out what is core, what is central, what you won't compromise on. But then you have to be willing to be flexible on everything else, because things do change, like this conference moving. And so, for example, when we were starting City here, we thought it was absolutely essential that we have a program for everybody that would say, because we thought national service should be for everybody. When we first started, most of the funders said to us, we'll give you money, but if you focus your program on disadvantaged young people, on young people in the city, thinking, well, they need it the most. And we weren't raising any money. In fact, we had somebody from the government come, and we had others who said, well, we'll give you big money to start this, if you do that. And ultimately said, well, if we do that, that's not going to be what we want City to become. And so we said, no, even though there was a point where we almost couldn't launch the program. Now, it turned out all right. If we'd done that, it ultimately wouldn't have been what we wanted. So you got to, other stuff, you got to be flexible.
This is brilliant advice for this group, and we're going to have a long and intensive day, so we should stay on schedule for it. I would love to go on and on with this discussion, and probably will in the interstices and in the breaks. So let me just ask each of you in the final moments of this session, you're a room full of emerging leaders in social enterprise. What would you tell them? What advice would you give?
Well, I think we've talked a lot about sort of the personal journey of being an entrepreneur, and I want to say that this is the most exciting time ever in the social enterprise space, and that you are going to be part of making it what it will be forever, at a time when sort of government is inherently going to evolve even more, and we've seen it all over the world, and certainly here in America, at a time when I think we're asking, what is the role of the private sector? You all will probably do more than we ever did to knit these sectors together. And we didn't get to talk about what I would like to talk about in terms of aligned action, but In terms of where I see this social enterprise world going, those that can walk in all sectors, that can really appreciate the constraints of government and the role of government, the success and challenges of the private sector, and the role of the nonprofit sector, and those that can win, those that will win will be the ones that can knit them together. And as we look at about 300 deals a year at Your Profit. The deals we're most interested in are the ones that have some way of knitting all three sectors together.
I would just add a couple of things. So when I was in college, I spent the summer as an intern on Capitol Hill studying the idea of national service for my congressperson, one of the most, you get access to really good people. So one of the things we got was Ralph Nader. And I'll just pass along the advice that Ralph Nader passed along to this group of college interns. He said, take risks in your 20s. Because you're young, you're probably the most idealistic, you're most, you're creative, you haven't experienced the world of people telling you, no, that can't be done, that can't be done. And so if you don't take risks in your 20s, if you don't pursue your passions, it gets harder. You get married, if you're fortunate, you may have children, if you're blessed, you have mortgages and whatnot. And so it's when you may have student loans. I did when I got out of law school. But if you can manage that, so if you have a passion for an idea, and a lot of people will be telling you, well, take that job, that secure job, or whatever. If you have a passion, that's if you take a risk now, when you're young enough, that you can, and the second is, be prepared for setbacks and for failures and learn from those. And again, if you're young, you can do that, you can recover. So that's one. The other thing I just reinforces is what I said before, is find a partner and build a team. And again, when you're in school, people look back on school as such a great time for us because you have so many great people who literally are with you every day. Roommates, classmates, etc. And so build up those relationships and try to get people to help you when you have that opportunity right in front of you.
This is really great advice. We've been blessed this morning on a day of 40 degrees of frost to gather here together to be able to be with two of the most profound social entrepreneurs and a founding couple of social entrepreneurship and pioneers and explorers in the field. So thank you. Please help me.
Alright, so we have two really quick logistical announcements, and then we're going to dive right into our next keynote. We have a really limited amount of time given all of our extra programming, so we appreciate your patience and chugging along. So the two updates that we have, the first is that for our keynote Q&As going forward, we're going to be using Pigeonhole, which is an application that will allow some interactive questions and answers. And so if you guys want to take out your phones or iPads, you can access this site by just going to pigeonhole.at. So pigeonhole.at. And the code that you want to enter is SECON2015. That's SECON 2015. So SECON 2015. There's also some information about this in your program book. But this will allow you to ask questions and vote on questions. And we'll be using that in David's keynote. And then the last announcement that I have is about lunch, which is going to happen right after this session. So anyone who's participating in the IDEO session or the IDEA Labs, so IDEO is at 12:15, IDEA Labs are at 11 a.m. Those two groups of individuals will pick up their lunches inside Aldrich, and that will be outside classroom 107. So only individuals participating in those two groups will pick up their